Monica Nevi, what's up? How you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I believe you're based out of Seattle. So how's the whole corona situation been for you?
Oh, I mean, it's as good as it can be, I guess. Yeah, I mean, my family's up here too, so that was kind of nice that I could be close to them, even though I don't really see them for safety reasons. But um, Washington did a fairly good job of kind of getting on board with what they were supposed to do, so that's been okay. But otherwise, I've just been kind of going crazy, making it up, uh, seeing what I can and can't do. A lot of online stuff.
Well, have you been going out or have you been, practicing quarantine yourself?
Yeah, we definitely stayed pretty strict in the beginning, which everything here was closed for the most part, except for the grocery store. So we definitely stayed in. And then as the restaurants and stuff, basically my strategy with everything is as soon as something opens, I give it like 2 weeks to see if it's going to stay open or if people, if there's some big explosion of transmission. So I give it a few weeks. But since
Yeah.
then, I've gone to some like restaurants or bars and sat on the patio maybe 3 or 4 times, but that's kind of it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
still trying to be careful myself with going to bars and restaurants. I've never really was that socially active in the first place.
Well,
Um,
that makes it easier.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not hard for me. Since the lockdown happened, you've been doing live stream shows, which you mentioned. So have you been able to develop any new bits since you've been working on that?
Yeah, actually, there's in the what has it been now? 6 months, something.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy, but definitely some new stuff. I mean, there's some stuff that's fairly topical that I probably won't use later, but we had been doing like just your standard stand-up comedy live stream show from my living room. So like three comics, you do, 10 to 15 minutes, and then I would close with like 30 minutes. And we were doing those like almost every week in the beginning, which was good. And it was a good time for it because it had just started and I don't think people knew how long it was going to last. And
Yeah.
so they were willing to donate a little bit more money then. But so I kind of had to be writing some new stuff. And then now I've been doing some live streams, some other people's like virtual shows, and still being able to have some new stuff, which is good. It makes me feel a little bit normal. And stuff I'm pretty proud of that I think we'll end up, using later in real life again and maybe end up on, an album or whatever. So I'm pretty happy with the fact that I've at least been trying to continue to create stuff.
Yeah. And I know a lot of comics haven't really been enjoying the whole live streams or doing Zoom. So since you've been doing it, have you started enjoying it or started seeing some positive outcomes from it?
It's such a weird, I guess, a double-edged sword in that you're like, it's not the same as obviously a real show, and that can be very obvious sometimes. But at other times, you're like, well, this is what it is right now. This is all we have right now. So at least I'm doing something. I can hear somebody laugh. Because it's we're all just making it up.
Yeah.
No one knows what they're doing. So you try it, you see how it goes, and then that's pretty much it. So.
I try to get into or jump on a couple of Zoom stand-ups. A friend of mine and sent me an invite to something that he joins, and I kind of enjoy myself just watching it. Usually, just everyone's there is doing the stand-up, and I think I'm the only audience member in it. But I'm just
Nice.
having a blast, and I don't want to intrude on them by laughing because it kind of interrupts them speaking. So
That's
I'll just write
hilarious.
LOL or the emoji faces, let them know that, hey, someone thinks this is funny.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. Well, trust me, they appreciate you, especially if everyone else is comics and you're the only audience member for sure. But it's nice to like be able to hear people laugh for once. Like
Oh,
now
yeah.
it's almost more normal to not hear anything, and that might really screw us up when we start
Yeah.
having an audience again. You're like, can you guys be quiet? I'm trying to
You're like, I'm used to
do this
silence
joke.
when I give my
Yeah, I mean.
jokes.
Oh, yeah. It's It's real weird. And then everyone, sometimes it's just like normal shows though with the Zoom stuff, because you're like, sometimes it's great, and then sometimes somebody's dog's barking the whole time and they don't know it's them, and then it's but that's the same as having a sold out show versus 15 people and they're all drunk or what, so
Yeah.
that's how it goes.
And I felt bad because one time I actually was like chewing or crunching on something, and, then and I didn't have my mic.
Well, you don't think about it, and then it's a whole, I get it, but then you have to, when the more people there are, the more you have to be like, okay, who is that? Who's got their mic on? Who's doing, oh, it's silly. But I do think that these are things that can be useful later, even if, things went back to normal.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot. I think we all learned a lot, and kind of, it's, I'll go work somewhere that's the smallest, weirdest place ever, and people will want me to come back, but there's no reason to, or no, but now this is a way that maybe they can see more of my stand-up and get more of that actual interaction with me than if I'm not able to come back to that place and be live. So there's a lot of learning going on, and kind of what can we use from this to maybe do later. So that's positives.
Yeah. Well, since things are starting to open up and comics are now doing live shows, are you looking into doing that? I follow your podcast. I've heard you say you're actually you're being careful on it, and you want to see how other people are doing before you actually can do it in person.
Right. It was interesting. I think the reason I started saying that was because here in Washington, they did open everything up again. Like, they were doing shows,
Mm-hmm.
and then they changed it again and closed all the clubs and music venues and stuff down again. And so with that time, I was pretty wary of like, I don't know if I want to go and do an open mic and just see what happens. Like, I'm going to let them kind of do it first. And then it got shut down. So, but I was all for outdoor shows. I'm totally fine with that. Seems safer to me. I'm not a huge, like, if you ever saw me, after a show, you'd be like, oh, she's personable, she talks to people and stuff. I really don't like it though. Like, I don't, when I'm on stage, I'm like, I've saved my energy to be doing this. And then afterwards I'm like, smile and go, and smile and go, like, so when people stand there and talk. So I kind of like the idea of like, we're outside, you have to stay away from me. Just say, I like it, or don't say anything. And then that's it. That's kind of, but they said we couldn't do that here either. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I have something on the 25th that's booked. That's an outdoor thing. And I think the venue is a little bit, hopefully it doesn't get them in trouble, but the venue is a little bit like, we're going to do it anyways. And I am basically like, yeah, I think I need to, so, I think I'm inching closer to doing more live stuff or more outdoor stuff kind of thing. And maybe I'll turn that into what the live streams before were, and just live stream an outdoor show on my YouTube too, and then just kind of take it down. So yeah, we'll see. I'm really missing it, to be honest. I think I knew I was going to miss it, but not so much of my life that goes into being a comedian. That's like, it's not, defining, but it is like, I travel most of the time. I was gone. I was, I had a bit more of a structure as far as how I created things. And now it's just flipped on its head. And I've created other ways to do that, but it's just, I miss the weird parts. I miss being alone in a casino hotel. Like, that doesn't make any sense, so it's, it's getting weird.
Well, obviously this pandemic has really changed the way comics do their job, at least for doing stand-up in person. So after everything resolves, what do you feel stand-up comedians would really learn from this experience?
I think it might really, if I'm going extreme here, I think it might really dismantle the importance of like an LA or New York. I think everything will be really spread out now, which I think it could have been before. People were just afraid of that. I think the creation of things on your own will be a lot different. I think the gatekeepers might have lost a lot of their power because they might even lose their venues. We don't know. I think a lot of those, maybe the power shifts a little bit. which is good. Or yeah, depending on who you are, I guess. But I think that there's a beautiful part of stand-up in that it's such a simple thing, because it really is just listening to a person talk, hoping that it's funny, and I don't think that'll ever change, which is kind of a beautiful thing about it, is like, no matter what the environment that it's in, it's still itself. So if you like stand-up, hold on, I think it'll still be there for you.
Yeah. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because the Zoom show that I mentioned, all the comedians are based in Los Angeles, and I'm the only one that was somewhere outside of that location. But anybody could just join in on these Zoom call stand-ups. I mean, you could be living in a farm somewhere in middle America or something, and really like do better than other comedians out of like New York or Los Angeles or Atlanta or something.
Absolutely. I think that was valid before this. People were just afraid of it, and it was almost looked down upon. I have a couple of friends who are built their own kind of following on, YouTube or whatever.
Yeah.
But then started touring all the same comedy clubs that someone on an NBC show would tour, because they're that popular. People wanted to see them. And I think that was looked down upon a bit. And I could see that shifting. I've seen some of the more famous comedians that I know just put stuff out on YouTube now. They just put a special out on YouTube, and you're like, okay. Yeah. I mean, but then you're in control of it, and you don't have to be anywhere. Yeah. I mean, a good friend of mine, Michael Malone, would joke about, he was like, well, this is when houses in Detroit were like, they're giving them away basically. And he's like, well, I could just go there and build a studio in it and then just do everything from there. And I was like, yeah, you could, that is totally true. But he was in LA, and I think most people there go back and forth with that, with like, well, I could still be doing 70% of what I'm doing from anywhere. So
yeah. I'm a big fan of comedy, and I find it funny, like different comedy venues that comedians perform at. And I've actually heard you mention before that you've performed at a grocery store. So I'm curious of what was that like?
I've performed in more than one situation where people were like opening the freezer behind me, like coming around. And that grocery store was in Portland, I think. But it was one of those that kind of had like, a little deli, and then like a lot of beers. That's usually where I end up being, is like places that are kind of a tap room. I don't know what you would call it. Like they have some of their own beers, but then they have like all these different bottles that you can get out of the thing.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me twice, where I'm like on stage and someone is like, oh, just trying to get this one behind you. And so that, you can't not say anything. So I'm like, well, which one are you picking? Just silly. I mean, it could be in a normal, well, maybe not a comedy club, but a normal bar or something, and they still put you right next to the door. So then people come in and out of the door while you're on stage. Like it's just, silliness for sure. Oh man, I've had some bad gigs like that. Anyways.
I would love to find a grocery store that would have stand-up comedy, or any places that I wouldn't really enjoy myself going to, but if I knew there was a stand-up comedy or comedian out there just going to perform while I'm doing my errands, oh hell yeah. I would tell everyone about it.
The post office needs some help right now.
Be
able to help.
Social Security office, all those boring.
Yeah, it's just a 2-stamp minimum or whatever. Not a bad idea. It would be interesting performing there. But,
oh yeah.
That is the other part. I mean, it's bad enough when you're performing at a bar or a club that people can go. You hear them with the servers like being loud.
Oh yeah.
But if someone's checking out all of their groceries or whatever, you're like, okay, this is excessive.
Well, if anyone's following you, they would actually notice on your Instagram bio that it states that women's soccer star Megan Rapinoe, you're her favorite comedian. So how'd you find that out?
I mean, the true story is, it's pretty funny, I think. I just basically decided that we were going to pick a celebrity to like pin that on, where like everybody is just like, oh yeah, Monica's your favorite comic, right?
Yeah.
And so I just did some like Instagram polls and was like, who do you think would be good? And they picked Megan Rapinoe, which is
Oh,
a good choice anyways. But
yeah.
I'm from Seattle. I played basketball. We used to work for the Storm. Like I'm pretty close to that organization in general. And so her girlfriend is Sue Bird, their point guard. I
Yeah.
know people who play for their practice team, you know. So since then, people have like taken photos with her and like tagged me in it and like brought it up to her and stuff. So it was this odd, like, it
Oh.
was kind of a joke, but now she's like been told this. So we're slowly working on it, and then
Yeah.
we'll get her to a show. I did my album recording in December, and I put them on the list for tickets and stuff, and like tagged them. I was like, if you want to come, you're in for free, you know. So it's just this ongoing like back and forth. Hopefully one day they'll just accept it and show up.
No, I like it. You just put a stamp on her. You're like, Monica Nevi's your favorite comedian now. I
Yep.
like that. Yeah.
I mean, and in real life, I don't know if she's ever seen anything, but I think she'd like it. You know, I
Yeah,
think
of
it's pretty
course.
good. So sometimes people know what's best for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I also appreciate, I think the people who like my stand up like sarcasm, you know, like kind of
Oh, yeah.
just being goofs. And so they jumped on board real quick, which I loved. They were like, oh, yep. They're like photoshopping her with like my podcast on her and like all this different stuff. Yeah. So it was fun. It was a good time. So I stick with it.
Yeah, that's cool. So I saw that you have a really interesting project in which you have a mini series on Amazon Prime called 80 for 80. So do you want to talk about what that's about?
Yeah. Well, obviously it was a couple years ago based on things that have been going on now,
Hmm.
but 80 for 80 is a documentary series where I interview people over the age of 80, but it's kind of in the theme of a sports documentary, the way 30 for 30 is. That's kind of the parallel. But there's like, you know, there's 5 episodes, one behind the scenes. They're all different stories, so they all have, you know, we had a couple who was married for 60 years. So we asked them what the key to a long marriage was, and she said, just don't talk to each other. Like they're very candid and they just say whatever they want,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
very funny. And it came from my grandfather passed away, and I felt like I had so many questions for him, you know, like just how he felt about his life and different things. And it kind of made me go, well, you have to ask before it's too late, kind of thing. And
Hmm.
he was very funny, always joking around. My family's just kind of like that. So I felt like that would be a really cool thing. It was difficult to cast, obviously, but I had such a good time and really had a lot of like, we want to do it in other places, and kind of like, you know, veterans over 80, people in the LGBTQ community over 80, you know, kind of a different, like do different themes would be really cool. So we
Yeah.
like had all these ambitions that honestly I don't think I'll ever put to rest. I really hope that eventually we get to do it. Right now
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
go into any person over the age of 60 and be like, hey, I'm just here, you know. Yeah, that's not gonna work. But it was very fun and very interesting, and I learned a ton about just making a project like that
Mm.
on its own, you know. So I'm pretty proud of it. Check it out.
It's awesome. I mean, talking to the elderly, I mean, they really don't hold back on what to say, especially to a younger generation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I used kind of the idea of like, well, your parents are always like sugarcoating things. They
Yeah.
want you to feel
Yeah.
safe and like everything's going to be okay. And then your grandparents don't always do that. But my thought was that it's like if you just got hired at a job, right? And the your manager, who's still going to work there with you, is showing you around, is not going to tell you the same things that the guy who's like leaving the next day or has put his 2 weeks in. You know,
Yeah.
he's
Oh,
going
yeah.
to tell you where
Yeah.
all the good stuff's hidden. He's going to tell you how to clock out on your phone or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
you want to talk to that guy. And that's what it feels like, more of them being like, all right, here's the secrets. I've been here for a long time. I know what to do, you know. So I had a really good time. And then, yeah, they're still up and you can watch them and enjoy it.
For me, I'm not really one to sugarcoat things for people. I mean, and I'm in my 30s, so I'm afraid, by the time I'm in my 80s that I'm gonna be far worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, who cares? And you can see kind
Oh
of
yeah, you
the
don't care.
spectrum. Yeah, the kind of the spectrum of that in the episodes. Some of them are sweeter than the other ones, and some are
Yeah,
lived more for sure than some of the other ones. So but yeah, none of them hold back for sure.
yeah. And so I heard one of your favorite guests was a lady by the name of Patricia. So why was that one of your favorite interviews?
It's funny because we had two Patricias, but one is Patty and one is Patricia, right? Which is
Hmm.
funny because I guess just you name them all the same thing at the
Yeah.
same time. Patricia ends up not being everyone's favorite, which we really thought she would be. When she
Okay.
left, we all looked at each other like, oh my God, that was incredible. Like, she had just these wild stories. She had, she was married 3 times and then kind of told us each, like, how she ruined each marriage kind of thing and like all this
Yeah.
different stuff. A whole story about Johnny Cash. Like, um, she would tell stories about having people at her house for these big parties, and then the cops would come over and just like party with them. And then as she left, we were like, she sold cocaine, right? Like that's what her job was. She was selling drugs and it is whole like just silly stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but she's super fun, and she like would come to shows sometimes. It was her grandson that like got her on the show, like kind of,
Yeah. Yeah.
it wasn't an application, but reached out.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while, before all this, they would just come to my shows still. So that's pretty fun, even though she couldn't really hear. But
Yeah.
yeah, she's great. They were all super fun and just very different. But yeah, good time.
I mean, besides hosting that show, you played a large part in producing as well. So what's the best thing you learned from producing that show?
I think the best thing that I learned was that so many people, I think, have an idea and are afraid to do it or think that somebody else needs to do it for them. And that's just not true. I mean, there's so many ways for you to just do it. And I'd read so many times, and so there's so much of this like artist for artist work out there that's like, well, if you want to write a book, then follow this. If you want to do this, then follow this. And I read in so many of those things that they were like, just finishing something is the best feeling in the world. Like you actually
Oh yeah.
made something. And
Yeah.
I had this wonderful team of 2 guys that I had worked with before that are amazing at their jobs with directing and editing. And I just got lucky enough that they were friends of mine that happened to be, available and cheaper, and like cut so many corners because of those guys. They knew people, they had the stuff. And they kept being like, because this is their job. They had been around a ton of different productions and at different levels of involvement, but they kept being like, isn't this crazy? Like, you called me and had this idea
Yeah.
and now we made it, and I
Yeah.
was like, that is crazy. So I think it was that really taking pride in like making something, being more confident in my ability to just make things. And I've always been a bit insecure about like, I don't know, are people going to like this? Is this a good idea? I
Yeah.
don't know until you actually do it. So it just gave me more confidence to like, well, fucking try it. I don't know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it might be great. So, yeah. And then obviously I learned a ton about how actual production goes, what costs are. I got a grant to make it, how to write a grant. That was
Yeah.
helpful. A lot of that stuff. So I learned a ton, but it was also helped me kind of move forward in these other projects that I've been doing since. So
I get it. I mean, from starting my own projects myself, I used to feel the same way, like, oh, people aren't like it, or people aren't think about it, or no one's gonna like it. And then by the end of the day, I mean, from hearing from other people, I just thought to myself, I was like, I don't give a fuck anymore. I'm just gonna like, I got to do it. I just got to get it out of my head. Like, at least just to say I got it, I did it. No, I don't give a fuck what if other people won't like it. I think I'll like it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and I feel like probably with art in general, but especially performative art, so much stuff is hit and miss.
Yeah.
Like you could have one video or one project that is amazing and everybody loves it, and the next thing you do, they're like, well, this isn't the same. And you're like,
Oh, yeah.
okay. So it's that consistency of like, you got to just keep putting it out and keep being confident. And as long as you're proud of what you're making, then you won't ever have to backtrack in that sense, because it does do things like that. Like 80 for 80, it's great. But then like way more people have seen my stand up. So then that goes back though. They see my stand up and then they're like, oh, she has a documentary series. Now I'll watch that. You know, it kind of, it evens out eventually, but just do it. I don't know.
I get it. Another project that you have, a long-standing project that you have, is a podcast that's called HugLife Podcast with Mike Coletta, which is now over 300 episodes. What got you to starting that project?
I think at the time I was just like, I want something else. I had done a couple of like video series and whatever. And I'm always a little bit slow on the uptake of like, you know, podcasts are going to be popular or TikTok or whatever. I go a little while of being like, I don't want to do that. Everybody's doing that. And then it's too late. But, so this is what, I mean, it's been 6 years, I think 5, 6 years. That's a long time.
Yeah.
And I had the idea of like, I want to do a positive podcast. You know, you watch the news, it's so depressing and upsetting. And, and of course, when we first started, it was, less structure obviously than it is now. You kind of make it up. But, Mike he's a contrast to my energy. He's a higher energy person with a more negative outlook, which is always very funny because I'm a pretty low energy person with a pretty positive outlook. So I think our contrast worked really well. And then I was like, hey, and he was like, oh, I was kind of thinking about doing a podcast anyway. So it timing wise just kind of worked out. And then ever since then, we knew each other before then, but we weren't like really good friends. Okay. But he's pretty good at being like, yeah, I'll do this with you, you know? So we went on tour together for 3 months. Then we moved to Los Angeles together. You know, we're roommates. It's a whole, and now, you know, we still do the podcast. It's very fun. I love it. And I do enjoy, still getting to work with him, you know, especially during this time. It's like, well, at least we still get to talk for a couple hours a week or whatever. It's been a long time. It's very silly, you know, it's still dirty and whatever, but it is positive.
Well, you mentioned dirty, and I believe it was maybe a couple episodes previously that he kind of brings it up that I think something he's been eating or something, and he noticed his poop was a little more squared.
Yes. Yes, he did.
Y'all talk pretty dirty on that show.
Yeah, well, we like to, you know, eventually it always comes back to sex or poop. And then, and then we live together too. And so at some point you have to be a little bit, honest with each other about like, hey, I don't feel good right now. Like you're going to have to just leave it, you know? So we knew, and traveling together, that was the hardest part because we were literally in a car or staying at some comic's house for 3 months together. So you're, you know, you kind of know what's going on and what, you know, if they drank too much the night before, you knew that. If they ate something they probably shouldn't have had, you knew that too. So it's, we don't have problems joking about that stuff, which maybe our listeners are like, well, we weren't there. So could you?
Thanks for the image, man.
Right.
I think you mentioned like 5 years, and obviously I mentioned, I would say the exact number is probably like 315 episodes around there, but from
somewhere up there, almost 310, I'd say.
Yeah. From the very beginning, it's opened up by saying you both say to each other, "You're great." So where did that idea come from?
I am actually like super into meditation and positive affirmations and stuff like that, and so it is a thing to say things into the mirror as if somebody is saying it to you. So instead of being like, I'm great, you would say you're great, because then your brain does the same thing as if somebody was saying it to you. Yeah. So that was kind of the thing of being like, well, at least this positive thing was said to him today, you know? Yeah. So we always just kind of do that. And then we tell our guests if we have one that they're great. And
Yeah.
yeah, we just, I don't know. I don't, I don't seem like as much of a hippie as I probably am, but I spent time in my younger years at like leadership camps and stuff in high school, and I hated them. I did not like it. I thought it was very culty. I felt like they were like, this is how you should be as a leader. And so I like the idea of bringing kind of a, it's not a pessimistic approach, but a realistic approach to positivity of being like, hey, it's accessible. It's a normal thing to like feel good about yourself and take care of yourself. And so that's kind of the whole idea is like, if no one else, if you can't even tell yourself that you're great, turn the podcast on, we'll tell you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. Since the podcast has so much episodes, is there one particular episode that's your favorite that you would recommend someone to just jump into it?
Man, let's see. I have a few, and they usually have guests that I remember, which is hard because I think a lot of people do like the episodes without guests, but I can't remember any of those for some reason. But we always recommend anything with Gabriel Rutledge. He's been on a few times. There's an episode with Jenny Zagrino, which I think is still in like the 100 area. Okay. That one's really good. Or Ryan Singer is the other one that I really enjoy. Just because I felt like Gabe had done it a few times, so he kind of already knew. But with Jenny and with Ryan, they were just like, oh, we get it. You know, they had never really listened to it or anything. They were like, oh, we get what you're doing. And just were like right in there with us, just doing the positive stuff. It's really fun. And we've had a ton of different guests and fun people over the years, and haven't had a lot of guests lately, but and I hate to like pitch the Patreon part of it, but we do an extra episode a month, right, on our Patreon page, which is only $1 a month or whatever. But if we have guests, then we make them positive spin their most embarrassing story, which I honestly like maybe more than our regular episodes. And I'm like, I gotta like tell more people to go and listen to those are really fun too. So we've heard some very silly, embarrassing stories that we've had to positive spin for people. I would, maybe is it Jenny Zagrino? Look for that one.
Yeah. Okay. Something I thought that was really nice and cool is that you mentioned charities too, or I don't know if it's like charity of the day but you mentioned charities that you're interested in. So what got you interested in just to mention like the charities during the podcast?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. That was from the get-go. That was something I wanted to do, like just even the initial idea. It's a weird thing to say. Like, I like charity. I would have the worst dating profile.
Charities are awesome. I would love to go on a date with.
I grow tomatoes and I like charities. Yeah. It's something that my mom, I think, has just always kind of been. She would volunteer for things and fundraise and stuff, and I always liked that about her for some reason. That she just was like, "Yeah, I'll do this thing and give my time and help." And I just always thought that was important as a child. Like maybe 6 or 7, people would ask me what I wanted to do when I was older, and I said I wanted to help people. That's really no direction. I don't know. Look at another dumb kid with no direction. But I think it's always kind of been in there that that's something that I like. And so it gave me the opportunity to kind of research and look more into, what they're doing with their finances, what they're actually, are they matching a mission statement that they said they're going to do, and things like that. And so we found some really, really cool charities over the years. It's also given people opportunity to share with us things that I wouldn't have found otherwise.
Yeah.
And, we pick a different charity every time. Sometimes it has to do with what's going on in the world, maybe, some type of natural disaster or something, or other things. But some are so innovative and different that hopefully, our intention isn't that every single time you're going to donate to this charity. Every week you're like, I donate to a different charity every week. It's just that maybe we'll bring up something that's important to you, and then you will find a charity that you hadn't heard of or hadn't thought of, or, something that really means something to you. And we also ask our guests at the end of every episode, if we have a guest, that they can share an organization that they often support, or, and through that, we've learned about a lot of ones that I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that part. It's my segment.
I love it. It's one of my favorites. And I've heard you mention on the podcast and interviews that you joked about being ordained. What made you want to get certified in that and marry people?
That's so funny. I don't know why that's come up so much lately. And like every podcast I've done lately, they've asked me about this. But maybe 3 years ago, 3 years ago, I had people who had seen me do stand that liked me, fans, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
He reached out to me and asked if I would get ordained to do their wedding, and they'd pay me and all that stuff. And I said, sure. It's, you can do it online. It's not that like extensive, but
Yeah.
I had never done one before. I'd done like readings at weddings and stuff. And in fact, I did a reading once at a wedding, and the minister was like, I don't know how I translated this into I should do stand up, but he was like, here's the reason I did this is because I am not very confident in my reading ability. I can read, it's fine. I've always been nervous to read out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So I memorized the whole thing so that I didn't have to read it. And did your normal, like I made eye contact with a lot of, I scanned as I would on stage. I hadn't started doing stand up yet at that time, but the minister was like, are you a church going girl? And I was like, no. It's like, I'm also 19 and drinking champagne, but sorry. But he was like, oh, you would be really good. Like I had reminded him of a different preacher that he had seen, who she also like memorized. And so she could be a little bit more conversational. And so I took that to heart as I can speak in front of people. Yeah. Not about Jesus, obviously, but I could, and so that kind of helped pile on to the, maybe I should do stand-up thing. But so I hadn't really done, it was so weird. So it's like just in their backyard, I put it all together, what I thought, and still now I ask people like, what do you want it to be like? Do you want me to mention religion? Do you want me to not say these certain things? Whatever. I give people a lot of options. They were so much like, oh, just do whatever you want. Yeah. And in reality, you only have to say like 2 things to make it legal. So all the other stuff that you normally hear in a wedding ceremony is not necessary. Yeah. So I always make that obvious. But for the very first one, he was like, the day of I get there, and he's like, okay, well, so you do like 5 minutes of stand up first? And I was like, what? You want me to do a stand-up set before your wedding vows? Like, and he was like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of part of the deal. And I was like, was it? We didn't really talk about that. Like, so I do it, and I'm like, basically just do material I have about my family and kind of make it about theirs. And like, they were like drinking in the parking lot. And I was like, I've never seen anyone tailgate a wedding, just, it was silly. But then afterwards, I'm like, all right. And I was still in stand-up mode. So I'm like, okay, you guys ready for a wedding? Like, like, who's ready for your next comic? Yeah, and then I just backed up, and like John Legend started playing. And then, it went very quickly from like doing stand-up to we're doing a wedding. And the whole point, and I still think that people hire me now or ask me to do it now because they want it to be funny. And so, I put jokes in there, but I don't really know these people. So I had to like ask them. I was like, okay, what are some inside jokes that like people know about you guys? Yeah. He doesn't tell me, of course, until like the day before. And he's like, oh, I got really ugly toenails, and Holly's truck makes a weird sound when it starts. And I was like, that is it? That's all you're giving me? Yeah. And I mean, I made it work, but yeah, so the reason I got ordained was for them. And now I'll do my 7th in October. So, oh, nice. Yeah, it's still batting 1,000. No one's gotten divorced, so that's good. Yeah, but it's kind of fun, and it works a different muscle, and it's nice to be able to be a little sentimental and a little funny at the same time. And weddings are nice. So part of the deal for me, especially if I'm doing it, because I've done a couple of friends' weddings now, obviously. It's like, well, if it's a wedding I was going to anyways,
Yeah, yeah,
like, it's a destination, just get me a room, just, I mean,
yeah,
they still paid me obviously, but I didn't like give them a price.
yeah.
But yeah, so then you get, a whole dinner and a stay and a
Oh, yeah.
whatever else out of it. So it's worked out pretty well.
No, I love the idea. I mean, I'm not planning to get married anytime soon, but if I was to get married, I would definitely have you, ordain it. But the thing is,
Yeah.
I know you roast people too, so you gotta roast us. You gotta
Oh
roast
yeah.
everyone in the
I
crowd.
would love
Yeah, you gotta roast
to.
everyone while you're ordained. So just like
All
roasting
right.
people.
Well, you let me know, and I
Yeah,
will. I will come prepared for
yeah.
sure.
So I've heard you mention before that you were talking about an album, and I think a video was released on some audio for that album. So could you share more about that, and when can we expect that?
Yeah, I actually have two albums that will come out hopefully sooner rather than later. Um, I recorded my stand-up comedy album in December of 2019, and I've heard what I think should be the final cut of it. So that to me says it's sooner rather than later. I haven't, it's been a weird time, obviously. So deadlines aren't always the same as they would have been before. Um, I'm pretty honest about those things and try to keep people updated. So, if you decide you want to be involved and
Oh, yeah.
follow the whatever, the website and the Instagram and all that stuff, then you'll definitely know when it's going to come
Yeah.
out. And then I have written and made an album of guided meditations. I used to do a monthly meditation on my YouTube with like stock footage, which I really enjoyed editing. And that was just for the month, like this is a meditation for August, whatever. And it's just kind of 2 minutes. So I took that idea and then made a 10-track album of meditations, but it was for like this one's for work stress, this one's for illness, this one's for going to a family gathering, whatever.
Yeah.
And had a composer from Los Angeles that I had met through doing a weird show in a mansion write original music for it. So it's actually, I'm very proud of it. It's good. And right now I think we only have 2 more tracks to mix and master, and then it's ready to go. So my thought at this point, just based on not really hearing from my label for the stand-up one,
Yeah.
is that the meditation one might come out first. But yeah. That one's called Chill, and the stand-up one is called Mostly Finger Guns.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, those will be available, and you can buy them or stream them or whatever you want. And if you need an example of the meditations, on my YouTube channel.
Oh, I did see that, and I did see a video of that you had about meditation, and you mentioned that you're big on meditation, and I'm myself as well. I'm always interested in other people's forms of meditation. My form, I usually just like to chill on the beach, just walk on the beach, and listen to music, just relax over there. So I'm curious of what forms of meditation do you use to help you?
Yeah, I like to mix it up sometimes, but I meditate every single day, and sometimes I just can't do it as long as I would like to, So I do I found a couple of music, whatever, just a song, a track that's however long, 5 minutes, and then I just listen to just that song, sit and stuff like that. I've also done a lot of course I can't remember what it's called. It's like a movement meditation, right? So you would just do the same thing over and over again. So I do that sometimes, but I also like to meditation at its core is just thinking about one thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's why they say focus on your breathing or whatever. It's just letting any other thoughts that might intrude, might stress you out, just go by, just focusing on one thing. So I find that when I can kind of get in the zone with basketball or even writing, sometimes I get in a little zone. I
Yeah.
feel very much that same thing when you come out of meditation. You're like, oh, that was nice. I didn't think about the stressful thing for a little
Yeah.
while. Yeah. So the other movement ones would be like
Yeah.
just shooting basketball, not playing, but just shooting, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to I just don't want to push it on people, you know. I feel like that's why people have a bit of a bad taste for things like yoga or whatever, because people are like, it's the best thing in the world, it will fix all your problems, and you're like, it's different for everyone, you
Yeah.
know. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I think therapy can be good for most people. Yeah, I think meditation can help a lot of people, but if all
Yeah.
you've ever seen is a picture of monks, you know, meditating for hours a day, you're like, well, I can't fucking do that.
Yeah.
You're probably right. Like, you know, you can
Yeah.
find other ways to do it, or just, and you got to be lenient with yourself. Like, I mean, I can only get 2 minutes in sometimes, you know, whatever it is, you got to just do it. But that's it, is just clearing your head for just a little bit. That's all. I love it. Well, and if you've never done it before, there are plenty of tracks on my upcoming album that will help you figure it out.
No, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, I do yoga and other, mention other forms of meditation, but yeah, I don't like to oversell, my meditation to other people, because like you said, it could work for other things. Like the music I listen to help me meditate could be different from other people. People could like to listen to heavy metal or something to meditate. Like that's their form of meditation. So everyone has
Yeah,
their own form.
I think. Well, and that's the thing. I think if people understood that it's not just that traditional sit meditation that you've seen, that it can be, you know, I don't know, building Legos could be meditative for
Oh
people,
yeah.
you know, whatever it is, just something that gets you to focus on one thing, that counts. You're doing it, you know. That's good. Um, yeah.
The Lego idea is not a bad idea. I should try that. I mean, I haven't done Legos, since I was little, but it's kind of, if you've seen people have like small models, like aircraft models or something like that.
Yeah,
Legos is the same thing. It's just, you get more,
absolutely.
specific.
Yeah, I bought some of the like architecture ones, the architecture Lego ones that are, you know, some of them are
Okay.
like big monuments and stuff, but
Yeah.
I did like a couple of the smaller skyline ones. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're just focused thinking on one thing and feel very chill afterwards.
Now you make me want to buy some Legos. I've been always wanted to buy like Star Wars Legos, like make a
Yeah,
Millennium
they have
Falcon
some
out of.
crazy ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say that one's pretty
Yeah.
spendy, but
I
go
always
for
wanted to make a
it.
Millennium Falcon out of Legos. That you know what? I'm gonna do that.
Do
Yeah.
it.
Well, Monica, we're at a recurring segment of this podcast called Words of Wisdom. So this question is: share with us a quote you live by and tell us why.
Oh man. This is I know that I knew this was coming, and
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna think of something good that um I really didn't. I think yeah, the thing that I probably live by the most is I guess it's just do your best and realize that that's all you can do. This is a very weird thing, and I don't often tell people this, but I have a tattoo on my arm that says, the ocean has it. And that's because I was in Hawaii alone after I had, or actually before I had performed a wedding. And I just like wrote down everything that I wanted to accomplish, that I wanted my life to look like, you know, all the things I wanted to get done. And then I swam it out into the ocean and just kind of let it break apart in the waves. And that's me being like, okay, I'm going to do the things that I am supposed to do. And then other than that, it's out of my control. It's something more powerful, the ocean. Um, I'm not a big like higher power person. And
Hmm.
so that doesn't really calm me. And so it was that more of like, you're just going to breathe. And then I guess it's a trust. Just
Yeah.
trust that it's going to do it anyways. Take a breath, do it anyways, and trust that it's going to work out. I've also heard, okay, here's an actual quote. What's happening is what's supposed to happen. And I think that many times in my life I've thought like, well, nothing can get worse than this, like this is going to be bad forever. This sucks. And then it somehow has fixed itself or gotten better, or you can go back and go, oh, that happened so that this could happen. And so whatever's happening is what is supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. You'll be okay. That's all.
It's a cool tattoo you have.
Thanks.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So since we're wrapping up, is there anything you want to share with our listeners?
Other than, come and find me on the social media platforms. Everything is just my name. So monicanevi.com, youtube.com/Monica Nevi, @Monica Nevi on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. I'm pretty good at keeping everything updated, kind of what new stuff's coming out or what's going on. I've been doing some live stream shows, some stand up, but then some other, I do a trivia night every other week. I do some other just kind of fun shows. So if you're trying to find something to get you through all this, go for it. And the HugLife Podcast as well. That's on all the apps, Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all those ones. Yeah, other than that, I hope everybody's doing okay.
And for our listeners, definitely catch that HugLife podcast, especially that episode when Mike talks about the shapes of his, poop.
Okay, well, I'm flattered that you've been listening, and I do enjoy doing the podcast. So, thank you.
I appreciate this. This is, amazing Irie Chat that we had together, Monica. But Monica Nevi, thank you so much for joining us in Irie Chat, and best of luck on everything.
Thank you.